Hey, welcome to the podcast. Joel here with Dad.
And I'm Rick. How are you today, Joel? What's going on?
Doing good. Hey, you were in Europe for a while.
Yeah, don't tell everybody. Yeah, we were.
Yeah,
we were gone for.
You were visiting C10 missionaries over there.
Yeah, serving in the rough spots of Spain and southern France. It was a tough one, suffering for Jesus.
Somebody's got to do it.
Yeah,
but that means there's missionaries over there too. So
yeah.
I know.
Actually, though, it is a hard soil as far as sharing the gospel goes, because it's kind of been burned over. People have been burned by the church over and over again for centuries, actually.
You have to get kind of creative.
Yeah.
I like when some of the missionaries you went and visited, they're musicians over there, which is kind of a cool way to get in there.
Yeah. Music's kind of the heart language of everybody, every language, every culture, every age kind of has their own music. And they do country western, which is kind of interesting.
I think that's
the French love it.
And the French love it, the country western.
They do it up big too. It's good.
It's really cool.
Yeah.
So we're talking about conquering mountains the whole year, and we're on relationships. Last week's episode about how to survive 50 years of
50 years.
Or I don't think it was how to survive.
Thrive.
How to thrive in 50 years of marriage.
Yeah.
Did really well. So I wanted to continue talking the relationship thing.
Yeah.
And I wanted to talk specifically about this thing that I've learned in marriage. Emily and I were talking the other day, and we were saying, what's the number one piece of advice we'd give for people on how to have a good marriage? And she's like, learn to work through conflict. And she said, she's like, I've been gifted in that I have a husband who doesn't mind conflict. She calls it a gift at this point.
She calls it a gift,
yes.
Okay.
But she said, a lot of people, she's like, I don't know if they have these hard conversations. And what happens is tension builds, assumptions build, resentment builds, and all of a sudden you just have these blow-ups. Yeah. She's like, you don't let it get to that point. And but I've had to learn that. Like one of the things I've had to learn is that the issue is rarely the issue.
Yeah.
So one of the common threads in our home is we have a small home. And when I'm in the kitchen and my very presence in the kitchen bothers her, she'll walk in like, what are you doing? I'm like, well, I'm making a sandwich for lunch. And she's like, well, why you got to do it here? And I'm like, well, because it's the kitchen. That's like where we make. When my sheer presence in the room bothers her, I know I've done something wrong somewhere in the past, and we have to talk it through. But usually what happens is we'll talk it through for like 45 minutes, and then she's like, I just realized why I'm mad at you. A couple of days ago, I asked you what you thought about this dress, and you didn't even comment. And I'm like,
yeah.
So it's an interesting thing that I think a lot of us, we don't even know what we're thinking until we express it. So, but the bottom line is conflict, the willingness to go, just because we disagree doesn't mean we don't love each other.
Right.
I call it fighting well, but I've learned that word fighting triggers people because some people have actually seen physical fights in their home. Yeah. So I would say that's my best piece of marriage advice is that learn to deal with conflict. So I want to talk about that today because you and Mom deal with conflict very differently than Emily and I do.
Very differently, yes.
Yeah. Emily and I.
We never have conflict.
Yeah, right. It's denial is a river in Egypt,
right?
Well,
I mean, the secret is, it gives you a little insight into our relationship when I asked your mom, as you remember, what was her best advice for 50 years of marriage. And she said, learn to cry out to God.
Yeah.
Okay, ouch.
Well, so that's a reality that so there's different styles, right? And so much of what we learn about how to navigate conflict came from our families. Mm-hmm. I know with Mom's dad, I knew him well, loved him, one of my favorite people in the whole world, but he was so passive. It wasn't even passive aggressive. It was just like he'd ask me to do something and then I wouldn't do it right away. And he'd like pace around the house going,
So did you say it's just aggressive?
I don't know what it was, but I'd be like, Papa, what's the deal? And he's like, well, I just wonder, I can't do this on my own. I just wonder, are you going to leave me to have to do this on my own? And I'd be like, I'm going to do it eventually. But he would pace around and I realized mom must have grown up under that. What would it have been like to deal with the tension of that? There's this constant underlying tension of conflict that nobody talks about. Emily and I, we just yell it out. And much to the consternation of our poor daughter, she'll often stop and she'll be like, stop. We all love each other. She'd say that all the time.
Oh, really?
Like, we do love each other. Like, but yeah. So Let's talk about that. Conflict in relationships.
Yeah. Well, I grew up in a family that was loud too. And I remember my mom saying, boys, take it out in the backyard, And so
fight it out.
Fight it out in the backyard, And I found real quickly with your mom that she didn't come from a family like that.
They never talked about that stuff.
If I would even raise my voice or something, it was like, it would just melt her. So yeah, I had to learn a whole different style of dealing with conflict, and I think part of our problem is neither of us, your mom nor I, as you may have noticed, are terribly insightful. We don't give a lot of. We don't do a lot of the navel gazing, as you might say. We don't
introspective.
We don't know what's going. Introspective. That's a better word for it. Yeah, we don't really typically know what's happening.
Navel gazing makes it sound negative.
I know, but that's the only thing I could think of. I know. I couldn't think of the big word, introspective.
Introspective.
We're not very introspective.
Or is it self-aware?
Self-aware. That's another. I couldn't think of that word either.
All
Navel gazing was the one that came to mind. But anyhow.
All right.
Yeah, so neither of us are really that way, but you're right that usually the issue isn't the issue. It's usually, and that I'll tell you one thing that did help me, and I think I've shared this probably before, was when I discovered like anger or frustration is a secondary emotion, because that did give me a reason to, okay, let's slow down and let's think about this. And see if you can rewind the tape to figure out, okay, what went wrong caused me to feel this anger? What was the emotion there?
Yeah.
Because frankly, I did not grow up in touch with my emotions at all. Didn't even, in fact, I don't know if I may have told you the story. We went to a marriage conference one time where the whole focus was on emotions, and getting in touch with your emotions. And it was just you and your wife, and then you went to a hotel room, you go to these sessions together, and then you go back and talk about it. And the first session was, okay.
Your worst nightmare, right?
Yeah, it really was, But I didn't know what I was getting into. But it was like, they said, okay, we were given the assignment, you have to go back and you had to talk about this particular issue that they brought up. And you can't use the word I think. You have to use feeling words. And so I went back, and I think we had like an hour to work on the session. I had nothing to say. I didn't know any feeling words. I would start, well, I think, oh, wait, I can't use it. Well, I don't know. I'm clueless. I got nothing. So in the second session, when we went back, they gave us a list of feeling words. Oh, wow. It really helped. I thought, oh, I do have some feelings because, yeah, I felt that one once in a while. And yeah, hey, that's a good one, it was not in my vocabulary, any of these feeling words. And so that helped. Then we were sent back again to do the same thing. And it really helped. And all of a sudden I realized, oh my goodness, I do have some feelings in there somewhere, And that was like the beginning of opening up Pandora's box.
Yeah.
Wish I could put them all back in there.
I remember in counseling learning that there are basically these 6 kind of basic emotions: happiness, sadness, fear, disgust, which is actually a thing. And actually, there's a lot of research that shows much of our perspective on the world is driven by disgust sensitivities. What's our sensitivity to disgust? They show conservatives have really low tolerance of disgust, and liberal folks have a little more openness to kind of the lack of order with chaos, craziness, right? So I
should be a liberal then.
Maybe. I don't know.
I have a high tolerance for ambiguity.
Well, then they say the other emotions, anger, which I don't agree with that. I think anger and fear are tied together. But anyways, and then surprise. Yeah. But they say those are the basic emotions.
Surprise.
But it is amazing how many people, especially men, I think, we just don't know how to put words to our thing.
Yeah,
the thing, whatever it is. So we find ourselves either happy or it eventually devolves into anger. So you got 2 emotions. I'm happy with this. This makes me angry.
Yeah. And when I realized that, something happened between happy and angry, and I don't know if they didn't know that when I was going to school, or they didn't know that before and they just somehow discovered that, but it was such a revelation to me that, okay, now I'm angry. Because the thing about it, when you're angry, I realized your mom can't do anything. Well, I'm mad. Okay, well, I can't do anything with that.
Right.
But if it's like, well, I felt hurt, or I felt belittled, or I felt not listened to, oh, then she can do something with that.
Yeah. So I think that's where navigating conflict is. First of all, we have to articulate what is the problem.
Yeah.
Like until you can figure out what the problem is, you're not going to be able to resolve it. And I think that's one of the biggest problems I think a problem in our world today is we can't even agree on what's happening.
Yeah.
Like, that's wrong. Well, have we agreed on actually what the core issue here is? And we don't even know we can't even agree on terms anymore. We can't even agree on what's happening. And that's one of the challenges in conflict is taking the time to, first of all, feel out what happened. How do I feel about it? And then you can actually have the conflict, right?
Yeah.
I mean, or you can address the conflict, better said.
Well, you can figure out what the conflict is, because if it's not the issue, again, if I'm angry, there's nothing you can do about that.
Right.
Well, okay, you're angry, but that doesn't, how do I unanger you? Well, I don't know unless I know what caused me to be angry.
And so many times the anger has built from something that happened a long time ago that wasn't addressed because there wasn't time to address it. It's just like, in the moment, or you're like, it's no point. What's the point?
A weird thing I've noticed too is when you're anticipating bad's going to happen, it makes you more angry when it happens. Like if something just goes sour and I wasn't anticipating it, then I go, oh, that's frustrating. But if I knew, if it happens and I was expecting it, there's like, I knew that was going to happen. I was just like with me maybe, but I think that's kind of common. Like when you're expecting it and it happens,
right?
You're kind of the fuse is already lit and boom, now you're ready to go with it.
Which is the challenge with marriage is there's this long series of grievances that slowly build. And you go,
she would say that.
I knew she'd do that. She always does that.
Yeah.
And I always tell people those are trigger words for when you're dealing with resentment. And resentment is really just, it's unresolved. It's unforgiveness, but it's unresolved issues is resentment. Where like you feel the pain of it over and over again. Sentir is the word in Spanish and French to feel.
Real feel.
So you re-feel it. When you resent it, you go, here's that feeling again of when she shuts me down. Here's that feeling again of when she belittles me.
The word meaning,
yeah. Have you not read my book, Fully You? I go into that whole thing in there.
Really?
It's probably been years. You probably forgot.
I probably forgot that. I've forgotten more stuff than I remember at this point in life.
I talk about that, how it's really a re-feeling again. And then when you anticipate what it's going to be like to feel that again, and then you feel it, you're just like even madder at yourself. Like, I let him get me again.
Because you're already raw. So like you're already expecting it.
And you're like,
it happened to me again.
I let him get me again. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me.
Yeah.
So
what's the answer?
Well, I think the answer is really taking the time. That's why counselors, psychologists say you need 90 minutes a week just to talk about stuff going on in life, not even how you feel about it. How the kids need to get where they are. We have this on our schedule, this and that. Counselors say you need at least 90 minutes to just talk about the details of life, and that's not even talking about how you feel about it. You need another at least 90 minutes to talk about how you feel about it, which is why date nights are so important, which I'm horrible at.
Does it count if you just talk to yourself about it?
No.
No, that doesn't work.
Yeah, that's not community. That's not, which is, I think a lot of the problem is a lot of people think you just talk, you've rolled over it so much in your mind, you assume the person you're living with also got it in their mind. But no, it did not translate by osmosis.
Yeah, especially if you're talking about the guys, because those guys, man, we literally can be thinking about nothing.
Yeah. So I think, gosh, we're already running out of time here. We could talk about this for hours, but I think the most important thing is to figure out, first of all, what is it that the issue actually is? And that takes a little while to process. Sometimes you literally have to talk it through, which can be frustrating because that time of talking it through, you go, I don't have time for this.
Yeah.
I don't have time to sit there and listen to her she's just rambling all the time. Yeah. Actually, the greatest gift you could give is probably giving her time to talk it out and listen and say, okay, what's the real issue here? And that's the core to figuring out the conflict is what is the real issue here?
So you say it usually goes back to something usually emotional or relational, like an insecurity or like with a guy, biggest thing with a guy is to feel like he's valued, he's competent. And so a disrespect, something that's disrespectful is a big one to a guy. But I know in my case, it was hard to say that. Well, you hurt my feelings. Oh my gosh, I feel like such a baby. So I realized that's what happened. I go, well, I'm not going to say that, But that's what caused it. And then, so she'll figure out what are the emotions, the fear, pride, whatever's that's causing that stress. And that's, I guess that's the first place to start. Unless you know what the problem is, it's pretty hard to fix it, isn't it?
Yeah. Thanks for listening. We need to do 2 episodes
Please
on that.
consider sharing this with your friends on the platform of your choice. For more from Joel Malm, visit joelmalm.com. For more from Rick Malm, visit rickmalm.com. Our podcast music was produced by Alex Burleson.